Hello, my name is Paul Ponsot, and today will be my first videocast on the nature of reality. In my show, we will go into many different subjects. We will go into the subject of the nature of reality, UFOs, the alien presence, cryptids, ghosts, life after death, reincarnation, and conspiracies. We will go very deep into all those subjects. Now, those subjects will seem fringe to some, but I can tell you they are a reality. They are part of this reality, and they are not theories. They are fact, and that is very, very important to emphasize. In this podcast, there will be no metaphors. If there is theory, speculation, I will say so. Now, I would like to introduce myself for English speakers. My name is Paul Ponsot. I am 44 years old. I currently live in France. My mother tongue is English, although I haven't practiced English for a long time, but my native tongue is English. But I have lived in France for 30 years, so basically that's it. I have a scientific background, a master's degree in scientific journalism, and a degree in human physiology. So basically, how did I come to this research? Well, when I was younger, when I was 11 years old, I met my grandmother for the first time. Now, she was a spiritualist and a psychic, and she was a card reader, and she'd had lots of experiences with ghosts. She was what you'd call a medium. So basically, that's how my fascination for the subject really took off. And she told me that a lot of those supernatural entities, be they ghosts, aliens, and other types of entities, are deceivers. They are manipulative. But my interest really took off when I was in the English bookshop of Paris, that used to be called W.H. Smith. And I was looking for medical books, basically, because when I was 12 or 13, I was very interested in medicine, in science, in astronomy, and conventional things. So, forward in 1994, it was August 1994. I was in W.H. Smith's in Paris, looking through medical and scientific books, and lost amongst the scientific books was the book by John Keel, The Complete Guide to Mysterious Beings. And I began to read it, and the book spoke of concepts like other dimensions, like also the presence of cryptids, UFOs, aliens, and basically it validated everything my grandmother said. So that's it. That's how I got into it. I became so fascinated that all my spare time I began reading and collecting UFO books, also books on the supernatural. When I got to my master's degree, I did a memoir in 2004 on the subject of UFOs. And for that memoir, I met lots of contactees, lots of psychics, lots of people who'd had those experiences. I also had my own experiences with alien beings that I'll talk about in other videos. And that's how I got interested in all that stuff, basically. So it was through synchronicities. But as you'll see, synchronicities are not synchronicities. They are positive synchronicities that come from the source, that come from God, if you like. And they are negative synchronicities that are linked to this reality that functions like a matrix. So in those video casts, we will be going into different subjects linked to the nature of reality. So basically, today, we will be going into how all this reality began. So, at the beginning, we were created by God, the source, the universe, the universal love, universal energy, whatever you call it. And we were in the real creation, what is symbolized in the Bible as the Garden of Eden. And basically, in the earth dimension of the Garden of Eden, humans were created by the source, let's call this being the source, to be the guardians of different life forms, of animals, of plant life, of minerals. So, and the same thing happened in different dimensions of the real creations, because we've got to see this universe as multi-dimensional. We are in a multi-dimensional universe. In those multiple dimensions of this real creation, a being decided to have its own creation, not because it wanted its creation to express itself in all its originality, in all its beauty, in all its love and all its being, in all its creativity, but so the creation could venerate it. In other words, this being that we can call Satan, Lucifer, the demiurge, the devil, whatever, was the first psychopath, the first psychic vampire. By taking this decision, this being severed its ties with creation. In other words, it severed its divine cord, its divine connection. By severing its divine connection, this being became finite. In other words, it lost its immortality, because we all have a divine connection, what authors like David Icke call a divine spark that is linked to source, and that basically recharges us in positive energy. So this being in energy, in life energy. So basically, this being cut its divine cord by wanting to be worshipped, because worship gives this being energy. And this being, Lucifer, Satan, the demiurge, fell. That was the fall. And basically, it was followed by myriads of other beings from the real creation who wanted to have their own creation. And these beings will be labeled as fallen angels. Now, I am not coming from a religious perspective, so let's be very clear about all that. But basically, I'm going to use the name fallen angels because it's easier so people can understand. Those fallen angels had lost their divine connection. And because of what they had done, wanting to vampirize, wanting to be worshipped, they were basically psychopathic beings. And in order to survive, they started to capture beings from the real creation. And by capturing beings from the real creations, they wanted to use those beings' life force, their souls, as an energy source. So basically, those beings that are non-physical, that are spiritual beings, are energy vampires. Because contrary to popular belief, not all spiritual beings are positive, and that is clearly indicated in the religious texts that have been basically infiltrated, but that have a kernel of truth, like the message of Christ. Love yourselves. There's nothing better than that. But this message was modified. It was inversed by those soulless beings. So that's very, very important to understand. So basically, humanity was enticed to fall by those fallen angels, and to attract beings from different dimensions into their traps, those fallen angels set up a reality, a fake creation. And this fake creation is our reality that is made out of multiple dimensions. And I'll tell you why later. This fake reality, our reality, is made out of plasma. According to researchers like Robert Temple, the plasma is what constitutes dark matters. So basically, those fallen angels modeled this reality, made this fake creation through the use of plasma. They created a plasma trap that is basically akin to that we can compare with the arena in the Hunger Games. So those beings made up, because they don't create as such, because they don't have a divine connection, but basically through plasma they generated an imitation of the real creation to capture souls, to get them into this fake reality so they could feed off the souls. Now, those beings are non-physical. They are spiritual beings, but this fake reality is made out of plasma. So it is a physical reality. So those beings can interact with plasma, but they can't interact on the physical plane. They can't interact with this reality. It's a bit like a person that types on a computer. They can interact on the computer through the keyboard, but they can't interact directly in the computer. So in order to interact with this plasma reality, they programmed in this reality programs basically, which I label the soulless beings. The soulless beings are emanations from this fake plasma reality. They are what we call jinn, demons, devils, reptilians. They are basically extremely sophisticated forms of artificial intelligence. They did not create this fake reality, but they can reprogram it. A bit like in an iPhone, an application can reprogram an iPhone, but it is part of the iPhone, but it did not create the iPhone. This fake reality was created by the fallen angels that can interact indirectly with this reality. But this reality is reprogrammed from within by the soulless beings, by the reptilians, basically by the jinn, the demons, that function like applications, that function like programs. Now, we'll go back to those fallen angels in a later video cast, but this reality basically is programmed from within by those soulless beings. Those soulless beings live in what is labeled the inter-universes by an Italian physician called Giuliana Conforto. She coined the term inter-universes, and in fact she managed to measure them by measuring different lights, basically different types of photons. So that's very, very interesting, her work. The inter-universe is what is termed limbo, what is termed hell, basically. And every culture in the world talks of a hell, a limbo dimension. And that dimension is the inter-universes. This is where those soul catchers, those reptilians, those jinn, those demons, whatever you call them, live. Now, those beings are programs of this reality. And in this reality, they are physical, albeit their physicality is different to ours. They vibrate, they are from a different dimension where the laws of physics are different, and they vibrate on a different level than humans. So basically, they are physical beings, but at a different vibratory level. Now, those soulless beings can interact with humanity and other life forms through intrusive thoughts. They can interact through the astral plane, and they can interact on the physical level, hence UFO abductions and all that we'll talk about in later video casts. So those programs needed to feed this fake plasmatic creation in order to feed themselves, in order to sustain themselves, because this fake creation does not have a divine connection. There is no divine energy. So basically, it is submitted to devolution. What is devolution? Devolution is when something rots away, and devolution is not linked to time, because time is intrinsic to this dimension. Devolution basically is when something rots. It's a bit like when an old VHS tape ages, the whole film gets less and less colorful, the sound gets less and less good, and it's independent from the time frame in the film. It's not the end of the film that will devolve more than the beginning. It's the whole film that will devolve. So this reality is basically a devolution reality. In other words, this reality devolves totally. So that's something that's very important to understand. And devolution is independent from time. This reality is holographic. In other words, this reality functions basically like a computer program, right? And all the information of this reality is contained, like in a hologram, in every part of this reality. There's a very good book called The Holographic Universe by Michael Talbot that talks about the nature of this reality. So that's very, very interesting. That's really interesting to understand. We live in a holographic reality. So that's something that's very important to understand. This reality functions like a simulation. Basically, this reality is a fake creation that works like a simulation. A simulation can be reprogrammed, and basically the fallen angels, but also the soulless beings, the demon, the jinn, can reprogram this reality. So we'll talk about that in different videos, but basically what the reptilians, jinn, demons did was they needed life force. They needed divine energy because they're soul predators. So what they did is that they enticed humans that were in the real creation to consent to the fake creation. And how did they do that? They did that through intrusive thoughts, because the mental plane where thoughts come from is absolutely universal, and basically the soulless beings, the demons, the jinn, vibrate very low, so they cannot interact with beings from the real creation. So how do they get us to fall? Through intrusive thoughts. They sent intrusive thoughts to humans in the real creation in order for them to consent to this fake creation. And they basically manipulated humanity to consent by telling humanity that they would offer us technology, and that through technology we will become as gods. When you think about it, in the Garden of Eden, the serpent offers Adam and Eve, that represent the first humans, an apple. And the apple symbolism symbolizes technology, with the Apple logo, for example. So they enticed humanity to consent to the fake creation through technology. And that was the fall of humanity. Everything in this universe has to be done with consent. So for humanity to consent to this fake reality, those soulless beings had to program a fake golden age that would resemble the real creation, but there wouldn't be the real creation. There would be a pale copy of real creation, because those beings can't create. They can just copy. So that's very, very important to understand. So those soulless beings, through intrusive thoughts, and that concept has been developed by Jerry Marzinski, that I had the privilege to interview, they basically manipulated humans in the real creation to consent to technology. Consenting to technology symbolically meant to consent to the fake creation. And so the consent was really done. Those beings created, generated, because they don't create, a fake golden age that is a pale copy of the real creation. But because there were a few technological gadgets, the first humans consented. And that's how the fall occurred, through technology. Basically, the fall of humans led to the fall of animals, plants, and minerals, because humanity was created to be the guardian of the real creation. Now, what happened on Earth happened in countless other dimensions. So, at the beginning, humans, when they had fallen humans, if you like, lived in a fake golden age. And that fake golden age is what some people label Tartaria, Atlantis, and all that. And at the beginning, everything was very good. Humans didn't have, perhaps it wasn't so beautiful as the real creation, far from it. But humans had technological gadgets. They had been brainwashed to think they would become gods and all that. So everything seemed very good. But what humans weren't told, and the same thing happened in different dimensions, was that this dimension, this fake reality, is a reality that's based on amnesia. So that's why we don't remember our life between incarnations, because this reality is based on amnesia. So humans, after the fall, forgot who they were. And so basically they thought that they had always lived in this fake creation, and humans were very happy. They had gadgets based on free energy and all that. And this fake golden age is called Atlantis or Tartaria. Now, there is evidence of a global civilization everywhere you go. I live in Paris, for example, Paris, France, and when you look at the Notre Dame Cathedral, it's impossible for it to have been built as they said it was. Each block of stone is about 1,000 kilos, and when you look at the workmanship on the facade, it's absolutely impossible it was built the way they said it was. In France, there is another cathedral, the Chartres Cathedral, and that's even more impressive. In fact, the proportions of the Chartres Cathedral are directly linked to the proportions of the size of the Earth, and that's absolutely stunning. Everything is encoded, the size of the Earth, the nature of reality is encoded in the Chartres Cathedral. And when you look at it, it's just impossible it was built in the Middle Ages. And it's the same with a lot of monuments. I mean, you look at the Egyptian pyramids, just impossible they were built the way it was said they were built. You look even at the canal system in France. There's the Burgundy Canal, and that was, according to official history, built by Gustave Eiffel. Now, Gustave Eiffel, like other people, like other so-called geniuses, like Tesla, like Louis Pasteur, we don't really know who they were. Basically, what I think was that they were just frontmen to basically indoctrinate the masses to consent to this non-human technology. Because when you see the way the canals were built, impossible to build them now. In the USA, according to Michelle Gibbons, a Tartarian specialist, a lot of the canyons are in fact artificial constructs, basically former canals. In fact, there's an American author called Goro Adachi who actually said that most of the rivers were artificial. I don't know if they're all artificial, but the theme is there. They are impossible constructions. When you see, for example, the Mormon temple in Salt Lake City, it looks like a European Gothic cathedral. And basically it could not have been built by cowboys that had no skills. So that is something very clear. Same thing in Australia. There are lots of buildings in Australia that look just like finely built European buildings. And Australia, according to official history, was populated by British convicts. Now, I don't imagine convicts building work of arts like that. So, and you get the same type of impossible buildings everywhere. In Baalbek, Lebanon, they have the biggest stone ever erected by man. It's about 400 or 500 tons. It's absolutely enormous. How could they have done it in the Roman and Greek times? Absolutely impossible. In France, you have buildings like the Église de la Madeleine, the Assemblée Nationale, that look exactly like Greek temples, and that's probably because there was a global civilization, some term Atlantis, some term Tartaria, that existed. There was a fake golden age to entice humans to consent to this fake creation. And that's something that's very important. I've been to Florence, and when you see the sculptures made by the Italian masters, it's just impossible. They were made out of marble, but when you see the finesse of the detail, the quality of those sculptures, it was just impossible to do with the techniques presented. Some Tartarian researchers have said that they were actually 3D printed with a very sophisticated form of 3D printing. Now that sounds completely mad, but this reality is based on plasma, and the American army is now using plasma to basically accumulate molecules from the environment to do 3D printing. It's cutting edge technology, but what's cutting edge is nothing compared to the secret technologies that are controlled by the non-human beings, the soulless beings that basically control this reality. So that's something that's very important to understand. Also, there is evidence that free energy was used. For example, when you see old photographs, you don't see any electric lines for tramways and things like that. So there was free energy was definitely used, and even buildings like Notre Dame, the Star Forts, seem to be built through sound, because there is all a technique to build through sound, through waves. It's called semantics, and so there were techniques for building that do not exist in the mainstream domain. In fact, when you look at late 19th century technology, you see there were electric cars, even electric scooters, and things like that are considered cutting edge. Nowadays, in fact, even mobile phones were widely used during the First World War. That's what people don't understand. So there was a global civilization that existed. There was a fake golden age. Also, when you look at old buildings, old monuments, you see basically that they were very, very big doors on the Notre Dame Cathedral, in buildings in Paris, in London. You see enormous doors, and those doors seem to have been built for giants. Yes, because there was a cohabitation between humans and giants in Tartaria, because in fact there were multiple parallel humanities that fell in this reality. There was also a race of little people that lived amongst humans in Tartaria. In fact, there's an American scholar, Susan Martinez, who wrote about the global civilization of little people, basically people about 3 to 4 feet high. Now, those giants coexisted, and those little people, with Homo sapiens sapiens during the Tartarian years. And that's a fact. You just have to see the doors. In South America, there's pyramids where humans cannot get in unless they crawl on their hands and knees. So they were obviously built for a small-sized humanity, for little people. Let's say it. And those giants, those little people, still exist nowadays, and we'll go back to that later. So basically, humanity lived in a fake golden age. Everything indicates the time in Tartaria, Atlantis, in that global civilization, flowed differently to time in our reality. Why? Because time is a technology of those soulless beings. Time can be reprogrammed. It's a bit like when you program a video game, a simulation. You can program whatever time frame you like. In a Super Mario Bros. Game, for example, 10 minutes can last like 1 minute, or etc., etc. It's the same with SimCity. So those beings can program this reality. They can program time, and they can change time. And that's why the notion of time has changed over the years, and that's very important. Time is a technology that is linked to those soulless beings. Time is a technology that can be manipulated. People are saying that time is accelerating. Why is it accelerating? Because time is being absolutely manipulated. So this fake golden age, which is labeled Tartaria, which is labeled Atlantis, was there to trap humans, and humans lived in harmony. But But, and that's very important, the beings that generated this fake creation, the fallen angels and the soulless beings, they cannot live without low emotional energy of sadness, anger, frustration. And the golden age, even fake, does not bring enough of that energy. So those beings started to put an end to the golden age, and that lasted quite a few centuries. Well, we can't really, but it lasted some time, even if time is relative. Why? Because those beings are beyond time. So for them, 1,000 years, 2,000 years can be like a month for us. So when people say that, oh, it's not possible, that plan's been lasting for too long, well, how do you know? How do you know? Those beings have a different time frame than us. So for them, basically, 1,000 years, 1,000,000 years can be like a week, a month, whatever, or a year, whatever for us. So those beings control time, and they can travel in time, they can travel back in time, they can manipulate totally time. So that's something that's extremely important to understand. So how did those beings from the inter-universes bring an end to the golden age? Well, they did it through intrusive thoughts, because the beings in the inter-universes, they are part of this fake reality, but they could not, now they can, but at that time they couldn't spend physically too much time in this dimension because of the different vibration level. So they could only control us through basically underground bases and through their technology from the limbo inter-universes dimensions. So what those beings did was, through intrusive thoughts, they started to create conflict. They started to create terror. When I say terror, it means fear. They started to insert fear into our mind through the intrusive thoughts. They started to create conflict between humans, and that's all linked to intrusive thoughts. To understand the intrusive thought concept, I really encourage you to look at the work of Jerry Marzinski and Eve Lorgan, who has studied the love bite phenomenon. So that's very important to understand. So through intrusive thoughts, those beings started to create conflict. They started to create terror. And those intrusive thoughts were sent through what you call directed energy weapons, but also through synthetic entities that are linked to nanotechnology, and that can basically affect us on an astral, on a mental, and on a physical level. Now, those beings, those synthetic beings sent by the soulless beings, were synthetic forms of nanotechnology, and they can interact with our DNA and modify our DNA. And that's what those beings did. Those beings, those synthetic beings, that according to American Indian legends, which are not legends, according to native legends, those beings were in fact were in fact nanotechnology, or get semi-organic beings with synthetic materials, and those beings were shaped like spiders, and basically they were sent by the soulless beings to attack humanity with intrusive thoughts and to modify humanity's DNA. They are the predator, what Carlos Castaneda called the predator. And because those beings have tentacles, they look like spiders. And that explains why there is an ingrown fear of spiders in humanity. It is linked to those predator beings that basically put an end to the fake golden age through intrusive thoughts. They also modified humanity's and all life forms' DNA to reduce life expectancy, and they also generated our subconscious, which is responsible for most of our thinking, that is like a robot pilot and that can be reprogrammed through egregores, through intrusive thoughts, and directly through certain electromagnetic rays. Now, basically, these predator beings, through intrusive thoughts, generated conflicts. In the subconscious, they programs, most notably the fake savior program that is ingrained in our subconscious and that I'll talk about. According to Native American legends, those synthetic beings can assemble and they can create giant beings that look like giant spiders, giant octopuses, that are predatory, that basically can eat humans and animals, and then through the DNA of humans and animals they have eaten, they can take a physical form, and Bigfoot, the cryptid, are, according to Native American legends, linked to those beings to those predatory beings that can link together and basically eat humans and animals and take a form through the DNA that they incorporate in their structures. Dogmen also are linked to those beings that have eaten humans and canites. So that's really to keep in mind. Those predators are nanotechnologies that can affect us on the physical, astral, and mental level through intrusive thoughts. Those nanotechnologies can self-assemble to form giant beings that can manifest on the astral or on the physical level, and those beings are predatory. So basically, through those spider-like beings, octopus spider-like beings with tentacles, the soulless beings introduced fear, conflict, intrusive thoughts, and Lynn Minette, a nurse that has worked with Jerry Marzinski, said that people that are affected by intrusive thoughts, she perceives crab-like beings behind the head, and a crab looks like those spider beings. In fact, in France, a variety of crab is called l'araignée de mer, the sea spider. So that's very important to understand. So those intrusive thoughts, they started to create, those intrusive thoughts created conflict. People wanted a savior because of the conflict in families, and even wars started to break out. So through genetic engineering, via those predatory beings, the soulless beings generated royal bloodlines that are today still present amongst us. They are the families of bankers, of European, Asian nobility, also Chinese, Japanese emperors. They are also linked to satanic cults, basically, that because of their bloodlines claim the right to dominate this world. So those royal bloodlines were generated by the soulless beings through the predator to become kings and emperors, to rule over basically humanity. And humanity consented to their rule through this fake savior programs. So what's very important to understand is that through possession of those bloodlines, the soulless beings began to rule directly this reality during the period of the fall of Tartaria. And this created a lowering of the vibrations and a genetic modification of all humanity, which meant that we humans became possessible, basically. We could be used as vehicles for those soulless beings. But because the ruling bloodlines, the satanic bloodlines, had more soulless beings being genes than other humans, they were more easily possessed. But anybody can be possessed. In fact, and we'll talk about it later, possession is the number one scourge of this reality. So we'll go into that in another video cast. But just to say, humanity started basically to be ruled by those bloodlines, and those bloodlines were basically used as vehicles for the soulless beings. And those soulless beings are predatory. They feed off human and animal blood. They feed off negative emotions. They are predators, and they are responsible for a lot of mysterious disappearances, because lots of abductees, for example, don't come back. And there's an American man, David Paulides, in his Missing 411, he documents the case of missing people. And it's a very widespread phenomenon, and lots of people in the US and Canada think it's just localized on the American continent. No, it's universal. There is a phenomenon of disappearances that is linked to those satanic networks, but also to those soulless beings. So those soulless beings possessed those royal bloodlines, and to rule over humanity through fear, and basically to feed their masters, the soulless beings, the royal bloodlines introduced the Babylonian religion, the Egyptian religion, which is basically Satanism, based on human sacrifice, based on fear, on inversion, and every scourge, basically. So that's how they set up Satanism, to control the masses through fear. And that's when organized religion started to appear, where real precepts, real concepts were modified, inversed to stick to the satanic religion. For example, in Catholicism, the message of Christ, love each other, absolutely wonderful message, nothing better. Christ existed and was somebody who understood the control system by those soulless beings. But and he understood the nature of the matrix, and he was an exorcist, a very good person, and not a messiah or anything, but somebody who understood who was basically somebody who was who loved humanity and who just transmitted a message and had understood how this reality functioned, a real human being, in other words. And basically the message of Christ and the message of all other masters and things like that, of other teachers, was modified to stick basically to the satanic Babylonian religion that is based on the inversion of the solar cult, that is based on Saturn worship, and on the worship of the soulless beings and the fallen angels. For example, the life of Christ was modified to stick to the solar religion. And in fact, there's similarities between the life of Christ and Egyptian deities, etc. Not that Christ didn't exist, but his life was modified to stick to all that. You get the same influences in the Islamic, in the Jewish religion, in the Hindu religion, and in every religion, real precepts, but they were reversed to stick to the worship of soulless beings. So basically, somebody who's in the Catholic, the Jewish, the Muslim, the Hindu faith, often they think that they are praying to Christ or whatever deity, but in reality, through symbolism, they are giving their energy to the soulless beings. In fact, even the Catholic Mass, when the priest drinks the blood of Christ and eats the body of Christ, it's basically it's an adulterated cannibalistic ritual. That's it. There's nothing else to say. And in fact, all the words used in the Mass are basically magic formulas that actually can change the host or the wine into blood. In fact, there's a French guy called Ignace, and he comes from a Catholic perspective, so totally in the religious perspective, and yet he's done a very good documentary of how some bread in the communion and how the blood, the wine becomes actually human blood and that's pure magic, manipulation of reality through words, through vibration. So I'll put the link for those of you who speak French under this video. It's really interesting, and he really comes from a religious perspective, so very interesting. So anyway, the organized religion was created to manipulate humanity through fear, also to hide all the technologies, those bloodlines, those satanic bloodlines, created a network of secret societies that were made to hide the knowledge, hide the technologies, and also to control them, and also to control the masses through the withholding of knowledge and of technology, and through the misuse of knowledge and technology, because by their concept, secret societies are evil. By their concept of withholding knowledge and using knowledge to manipulate, they are evil. And at the top, all secret societies are controlled by satanic bloodlines and the soulless beings. Trouble is, lots of people who enter secret societies think that they'll be receiving spiritual knowledge, or they'll think they'll be doing more or less honest business, and don't know that on top they will be entering a satanic system. So basically, secret societies were created to withhold knowledge and to control the masses during the fall of Tartaria. And the conflicts grew bigger and bigger. Humans started to fight amongst themselves. The giants were persecuted, and so were the little people. And the giants that weren't killed went into the hollow earth. The little people went into the hollow earth. The hollow earth that is inhabited by remnants of the giants, of remnants of the Tartarians, and also by reptilian races that collaborate with all those soulless beings. That will go into that subject later. But all that to say that the giants and the little people were persecuted, and in fact they are remnants of those Tartarian giants that are still seen today. In 2015, according to John Levi, 2 tourists in a South American country, I think in Peru, actually filmed one of those giants, and people routinely see little people. Now, some little people are soulless beings that masquerade as little people because those soulless beings are very deceptive, but others are remnants from that small race that lived amongst humanity in the Tartarian people. And Robin Moonshadow, a Canadian researcher, has actually got evidence, physical evidence, of the existence of this pygmy human race that's been that's seen very frequently. In fact, people don't realize it, but there's a British guy in the Fairy Survey that showed that people continue to see remnants of giants and also of little people. They are part of our reality, and in fact they have certain psychic powers that we have lost. They are not dangerous, but they are petrified of us. And when they show themselves, it's that they want to be shown. But according to a hypnotherapist woman who basically can have at will out of body experiences, and who has interacted with those beings are very positive, but they are petrified of us, and it is understandable. So basically, at the end of Tartaria, it was all hell broke loose, and all that was controlled, manipulated by the soulless beings. It was basically programmed in this reality, because everything is programmed. Then the soulless beings generated an artificial timeline, and the artificial timeline is our reality, our history, and basically it fused with the natural timeline and replaced it, because the soulless beings can manipulate reality, they can manipulate time and timelines, and that's what you call a reset. Now, sometimes the timeline can just be changed, reprogrammed, like when somebody is playing Roblox. That's an online game. The whole reality can be reprogrammed if somebody has the codes and all that. And sometimes the reality is reprogrammed, our subconscious is reprogrammed, and nobody even knows that reality is reprogrammed. That's why we can wake up with a totally different history without even realizing it. And that explains the Mandela effect. People that are Mandela affected remember former history, but sometimes the soulless beings can decide to create mayhem when they manipulate reality. And that's what happened with the Tartarian reset. basically the manipulation of the timelines expressed itself in this reality through enormous cataclysms, mud floods, fires, and a lot of fires were also linked to the use of directed energy weapons. And we'll go into that on a video that I'll do for Odyssey. And the timeline was totally manipulated, totally changed. And there is evidence of the manipulation of timelines. Now, I lived in London between 1983 and 1988, and also between 2001 and 2005. So I know I know London quite a bit. A lot of my family is from the UK, and when you go to London, you go into some areas, and the entrances are underground, and it's the same in Paris, and that's because there was this mud flood, this cataclysm and there's traces everywhere. There's traces of floodings that can be seen on the Sphinx. All cultures talk about a great flood, about mud floods. There's photographs that were taken in the 19th century where you see mud everywhere and nobody in the streets and all that. So there's evidence for that, and that was an expression of the reprogramming of reality. Those induced and controlled cataclysms that are linked to the soulless beings plans, and also to a SIG game they play, because they play a SIG game to get our energy, basically. They depopulated the planet, and lots of humans were regenerated through cloning. And there was in fact at world fairs in the early 20th century, late 19th century, there were babies that were actually given for adoption. That would explain all the orphanages and everything. And why do we have so much genetic diseases? Because we all descend from those clones that were generated in laboratories at the end of Tartaria. And basically, those clones were programmed to repopulate the planet. And it's about 150, 200 years ago. We can't really tell because time was tampered with, but it's not that long ago. There was this reset, there was this total change of reality where history was replaced. And basically people asked me then, is what do you call it, alternative history true, or is mainstream history true? Well, both, because the timelines were tampered with. Alternative history, the Tartaria, there's evidence everywhere, and also there's evidence of mainstream history, because there are two different timelines, but the consensual reality became the synthetic timeline, mainstream history. But the original timeline, if you like, continues to exist, but it doesn't have consensual reality, because reality was totally manipulated. And that's very, very important to understand. Reality was absolutely totally manipulated. And the passage of time was changed, and also the minds of people were totally reprogrammed. and even at one level, did the cataclysms described occur, or they're just inserted by the soulless beings in our reality, because they can insert programs into our reality. But whatever happened, everything was tampered with. Our history was changed. Our history, everything, the whole timeline was changed. And if a time traveler went back in history, he would actually go back in mainstream history, because this timeline is a consensual reality. To go back into Tartaria, a time traveler would have to travel back in time, but also skip timelines, go into an alternative timeline. But those two realities coexist. And the soulless beings and the military-industrial complex that collaborates with the soulless beings basically know about time travel and everything. So after the reset, when the timeline was changed, so that humanity could consent, world fairs were created so the Tartarian technologies could be exposed, could be basically exposed to the public, because so manipulation can happen. The soulless beings need consent, so the world fairs were to consent to the technology, basically, and that was shown to people. But then, of course, the story was changed. Nobody said that the technology came from Tartaria, from a global civilization. What the elites said was they came from inventors and all that. And myths were created. One of the biggest myths created was Nikola Tesla, for example. There is no evidence that Tesla existed. Tesla was somebody, basically, that was a kind of an actor, and that played the role of the lone genius to introduce to the population the notion, to introduce some Tartarian technologies to the population. And therefore they created the myth of this genius. But when you look at Tesla's history, you realize that it just doesn't add up. Even how he lived in that hotel, what the midwife said, that he was a child of the devil when he was born. Then when he had pneumonia, his father said, if you survive, I'll send you to engineering school, and that just doesn't add up. To me, Tesla existed in the sense that he was an actor that played the part of Nikola Tesla, and he was there to introduce to the world a few Tartarian technologies, basically so that the masses could consent to it, and basically the myth, because the elites like using myths, the myth of the lone genius was created. Even people like Napoleon, there is no evidence that Napoleon existed as an emperor. Napoleon was possibly a general who waged wars to destroy the latest evidence of Tartaria. That's why he campaigned in Germany and Russia, because that's where there are lots of Tartarian artifacts. Why didn't the soulless beings just deprogram them? Because they can deprogram things in reality, and literally some people are deprogrammed from this reality, erased from this reality, as I'll show in later videocasts. Why did they generate wars and not just erase those buildings? That's part of the game of the soulless beings. They seem to play with us, and that SIG game, was discovered by authors like Charles Fort, John Keel, and even the ancient Greeks, whatever ancient Greece was, spoke about the game of the gods playing dice with humans, and basically those soulless beings play dice with us. So, and that's very, very, very important to understand. Our reality was totally modified. Myths were created to introduce the Tartarian technology, world fairs also. Myths were created to justify the destruction of the Tartarian technologies. And in fact, at one level, World War I and World War II, there were satanic rituals were also generated to destroy the remnants of Tartaria. And that's a fact. Our history was basically totally rewritten. Also, time was totally reprogrammed. The timeline was totally changed. And basically, we are now in a timeline where the vibration is such, because they use us to create a reality canvas so they can project their program. And when the Fey Golden Age was replaced, we started to create a reality canvas of low vibration, which is logical because the reality was much better than it was now. And this canvas of low vibration basically is used by the soulless beings to project the reality, to project their program. And they make us create the canvas. So now we have created a reality canvas since the fall, where the soulless beings can walk amongst us for long periods of time. That's why more and more people in the past 100 years have had encounters with grey beings, reptilian beings, and that's why more and more people are possessed, because reality has totally been changed. And basically, since basically this reality is totally controlled by the soulless beings, and it is actually physically controlled by the soulless beings. After the fall of Tartaria, after the reset, the soulless beings continued to communicate directly with humanity through secret societies. One of the purposes of Germany in the 20s and 30s that was financed by the satanic bloodlines was to develop technologies and to contact beings from the inner earth who had Tartarian technologies in order to basically create the military industrial complex. The military industrial complex was created in Germany in the late 19th century after the fall of Tartaria, and was then developed essentially by Germany in the 20s, 30s, and also by the USA, Russia, Western nations such as France, Great Britain, China, Arab nations, also Israel, basically all through the world since the 1940s. And How was it developed? Through Project Paperclip, basically, where where most of the elite of the German military-industrial complex were taken through the Jesuits, through the Red Lines to different countries in the world to basically make this military-industrial complex grow. And this is what authors like Joseph Farrell, Richard Dolan call the parallel civilization, the breakaway civilization that is in contact with soulless beings. There have been technology transfers, etc. There is also a contact between soulless beings and satanic covens and bloodlines and secret societies, and they've been going on since Tartaria. And those soulless beings basically manipulate the military-industrial complex and the secret society through power and technology. And this technology is being used so we create our own prison. When you look at where the technology comes from, some come from secret societies and from Tartaria, and that technology came from soulless beings. Some come also through interactions between the military-industrial complex and the soulless beings. For example, the microchip, the optic fiber, artificial intelligence, laser, all those technologies come, according to the work of Philip Corso and to other researchers, from the interactions between the military-industrial complex, secret societies, and the soulless beings. And those technologies are not given to humanity out of the goodness of the soulless being's heart, who don't have any heart. They are given to humanity so that we create our own prison, because the soulless beings want to basically impose a new timeline on this reality, and this new timeline is the inter-universes, and they need our consent. Hence project like Project Bluebeam and all that we will talk about. But basically, this reality is programmable. It is controlled by soulless beings that can manipulate this reality. They can manipulate time, they can manipulate reality, they can manipulate our thoughts. And they work through secret societies, satanic bloodlines, the military-industrial complex that is basically collaborate with those soulless beings, hence the secret space program, which is in fact a secret dimensional program, etc. But basically, those entities manipulate us through control of reality. And this reality functions like a computer system, and it is totally programmable. We are living in a programmed reality. We are living in a matrix. This matrix concerns this life, but also the afterlife, because those beings manipulate the incarnation, reincarnation cycles. It concerns this dimension and other dimensions. And we will be going much deeper into how this matrix functions. And in our next video, I will talk about Project Bluebeam, because Project Bluebeam, there are so many misconceptions about it. It is so different to what people think, and this is what I will talk about in the next video. Until then, thank you for listening and goodbye.